All right, it is just a couple days before actual football happens, which means we're going to make completely terrible predictions about what is going to happen. We'll get there in a second. We're going to start with Deandre Hopkins, who now highest paid non-QB, $27.25 million signing bonus. Mr. Mays of The Athletic now. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Your take on Deandre Hopkins and the Arizona Cardinals.
I mean, it makes sense. I think when you make that sort of bold play for a receiver, and he's one of the reasons that he was available is because he was probably unhappy with his contract. Something like this was probably on the horizon. It's a team that hasn't paid a ton of its in-house players, considering how bad they've been over the last couple of years. They have the money to spend. I think it sends a message to the rest of the locker room. I mean, it definitely falls in line with everything else they've done with Deandre Hopkins and with kind of the trajectory of the franchise this offseason.
Yeah, I mean, I love it. And my favorite part about this is that the rest of the Arizona wide receiving core can kind of fall in line. You know, last year they got the spread system. They're running 4 wide. And Larry Fitzgerald is leading the league in screen targets with 24. Like, the old man doesn't need to be catching screens anymore. So you have a true number one in DeAndre Hopkins, a guy that Kyler Murray can rely upon. Kyler loves throwing the ball outside the numbers. That's where Nuke is going to win. Larry Fitzgerald can be the uber possession guy even in year 20 right now, right? We've got Christian Kirk. We have Andy Isabella at his speed. They actually have these other guys that can be nice complementary pieces around their true number one in Nuke.
Two big takeaways here. The first has to do with the Texans, who ate a bunch of David Johnson's contract to get rid of DeAndre Hopkins, then proceeded to pay their all-star, all-world quarterback, and he gets a signing bonus that's actually less than what DeAndre Hopkins is going to get for this coming season, which is crazy to me. So Bill O'Brien gets an assist here. But this is huge for the Cardinals, and you mentioned it, Steve. No one on the outside that got open. They didn't have a single receiver on the outside earn a top 75 PFF grade. Like that's actually hard to do. And so locking a guy down that can do this gives you a chance to see what Kyler can do. And it's a big deal, but it's not that much bigger. The signing bonus number looks big, but it's actually, I think, a pretty decent deal for a guy that has great hands. We've seen that Larry Fitzgerald, another guy with great hands, has continue to produce long into his career. I just love what the Cardinals are doing.
It's not a bad move in your second year with your highly drafted quarterback to replace the 85 targets or so given to Damiere Byrd and Keyshawn Johnson with DeAndre Hopkins. It's typically a step in the right direction. So if you're trying to find reasons for optimism, it's not really hard to make that jump with the Cardinals. It's year 2 of Kyler Murray.
From one receiver who's pretty good to another receiver who's very good, and that's Davante Adams. I don't know about you guys, but I have a couple of fantasy drafts that I'm trying desperately to prepare for. And one of the questions that I have is, who is the best wide receiver in fantasy football? There's some thought that it is Davante Adams. Mr. Mays, I know you play a little fantasy. What do you think?
I feel like that's totally reasonable because we know that fantasy targets are king for wide receivers. It's all about volume. How many looks are you getting? And if you look at the rest of that receiving core, you can't feel good about giving much work to anybody else. They didn't go out and get anybody in the offseason. I'm a little bit worried about how much passing volume there would be for the Packers this year. That would be the only thing that would give me pause. But when you consider the rest of the depth chart, what his usage is going to look like, how good of a player he is, all the factors that we typically look to when you're trying to pinpoint that number 1 through kind of number 3 guy in fantasy, he checks all those boxes. So I wouldn't have any issue with it whatsoever, especially if you think that Michael Thomas with Emmanuel Sanders coming in there, full season from Alvin Kamara being healthy is going to get a little bit less work.
Yeah, our own Jared Evans over at PFF.com made this declaration, and I think this could have been declared on draft night, right? As soon as Jordan Love got picked, and then especially when A.J. Dillon got picked, it was like, all right, I think Davante Adams might be getting a few more targets this year. Aaron Rodgers does play favorites a little bit. He likes Alan Lazard, but he loves Davante Adams, and he doesn't love the rest of the receivers over there in Green Bay. I'm with Robert, though, about the volume, because my concern with the Packers is that they're trying to be the Niners. They think they're trying to be the Titans. They're trying to be this run-first team and take the ball out of Aaron Rodgers' hands. But at some point, they're going to have to pass, and Davante Adams is going to be fed all of those targets.
And here's the key. What he does in the red zone is just better than what anyone else does in the red zone. And that's something that our own Timo Riske found is kind of actually sticky for wide receivers. It's a trait. We've seen it on the reverse with Julio Jones. And I do think they pivot away from throwing a ton. But when they do throw, every single one should go to Davante Adams. I would argue that even though he's been a target monster, he hasn't gotten enough targets. The guy is continuously open. Josh Hermsmeyer did a really cool study on separation. found that Davante Adams is continuously getting more separation than you'd expect. You see it when you watch the Packers play. The tough thing for me, though, is when you watch the Saints, even though there are more people to compete, they are just such a more high-powered offense. I think if I had to, I would still take Michael Thomas. I don't know. Robert, do you think that they are going to pivot hardcore to running the football, or will Aaron Rodgers push back on that a little bit?
I think they might. And one of the reasons that I think that they might go in that direction, I've said this before, is that I don't think they have less faith in Aaron Rodgers as a player. I think they want to take more control of the offense. When you have that kind of outside zone, play action, heavy passing game that we've seen kind of take over the league in a certain way over the last couple of years, a lot of those coaches want a quarterback who's just going to be the trigger man that does what they want and makes the decisions that they encourage. Rodgers has a lot more agency, whether it's on third down or in the red zone. He has control of that offense, or at least did last year when they had a meld of those two systems, more than he would if you went more run heavy and try to take the ball out of his hands. So I think they just want to be a little bit more predictable and understand what they're going to get on a down-to-down basis, and running the ball more is a way to do that.
Man, that's going to be fun to watch. Okay, it is prediction time. And so bold prediction for 2020. I have a couple. I don't know which one I'm going to use just yet. Robert, you can go first.
I'm going to kind of pivot off of what our first discussion topic was. I'm going to say that the Arizona Cardinals are going to make the playoffs.
Ooh.
I just think that you can see the jump
division.
coming. I love it's a good division, but I mean, they're obviously the extra wild card team. I just think that they absolutely could be in line to be a double-digit win team, even when you consider the division, because of how much their offense is going to take a jump this year. I mean, they were a pretty good offense last year for stretches, super inconsistent. I think if they can smooth that out a little bit with Hopkins, the design of that run game I feel like is excellent. I have more faith in their offensive line as the most injured group in football last season. And their defense, there are question marks, but I'm big on the hope for a great offense and hope for a random couple bounces on defense strategy. And I think that absolutely could be in play for them.
All right, Steven.
So Baker Mayfield, who I mentioned, I think bounces back. I think he actually has a better season, because we're being bold, better season than Lamar Jackson. We've got 5 years of data on Baker Mayfield, 3 of them in college, 90-plus grades every single year. His first year in the NFL, which seems like it was so long ago, 2018, we had him as a top 10 quarterback by PFF grades. Now, last year was not good. He didn't trust the offensive line, but the whole team was a disaster. I've never seen an offense as out of sync as the 2019 Cleveland Browns, which is part Baker Mayfield, but part everything else. I think they get back on track this year. I think Baker, there's so much evidence that he's really good and that last year was an anomaly, so I'm calling him to bounce back and maybe even be the best quarterback in the AFC North this year.
Love it. All right. I have to do this one. This one is a special for my good friend, Robert Mays.
Oh, no.
The Detroit Lions are going to win the NFC North. It is going to be a wire-to-wire exhibition of offensive excellence from Matt Stafford and that beautiful downfield passing game. The poor languishing Bears will be competing for a different prize, which will be either Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields. I actually think that should make you happy, Robert, even though, I know you love your Bears.
I'm fine with that. I mean, trust me, that's a direction, even if it's a direction that nobody else is going to be excited about. I have a question for you, though. How are you trying to kind of reconcile this great offense with the Lions adding 25 running backs because they're going to run the ball 45 times a game?
Here's my take on this, because trust me, internal conflict. But where there's a will, there's a way. And so the way I've spun it to myself is that you set up the play action game in the offseason. You set up in the minds of your opponent that you're going to dedicate yourself to the run. And looking at how efficient Matt Stafford was throwing the ball downfield, all you need is that little extra tenth of a second, bunch of play action passes that I'm confident he'll hit on. It does worry me just a little bit, but I will say this, at least Adrian Peterson is now there. And I feel good about Adrian Peterson in the backfield no matter where he goes. Continually a winner.
I don't feel good about anybody if they're running it 55 times a game. You can have Adrian Peterson in 2012 back there. I'm not sure it would matter for their overall efficiency.
You want to get rid of me and get back to more great PFF YouTube content? All you have to do is push that button right there and subscribe. Thanks for watching.